All right, so I guess first of all, I think we have some new people. We have some new people out there.
Yes, I'm new.
Okay, fantastic.
Hi, Julie.
Hello, hi.
And we had a Christina that was going to come tonight, but I don't see her name. So I want to welcome new people and let you know that you didn't miss anything important. That's not true. You missed plenty of things that were important, but I'm thrilled to have anybody come in at any point. We'll support anybody no matter where they come in. And this class is incredibly supportive. If you go to our Facebook page, you'll see that they're posting lots and lots of journal entries, and they're very supportive and helpful and sharing resources. It's been really great. Hey, Joni, where's your cousin?
I don't know. I think she's out enjoying the beautiful evening right now.
You're allowed to do that.
I checked in with her earlier. She said she might join us.
She missed Monday too, or Tuesday. She missed.
I know.
Book art.
I know.
That's all right. I don't take attendance. I just miss my friends. All right. So today we're going to talk about maps. One of the things that I got a sense from Da Vinci Pursuit. I guess I need to stop, and Mark's not here, but I need to do this anyway. This class is sponsored by the Da Vinci Pursuit, which is a group in Indianapolis, Indiana, that brings artists and scientists together to explore how creativity helps support scientific thinking and vice versa. And it's a really great group. They sponsor classes like this, a lot of roundtable discussions, meals where they put people at tables that they mix people up and they have discussions. Some topics are pretty hot, and some are just, regular old science stuff. But they're a fantastic group, and their presence really is known in Indianapolis, and it's been really, really helpful. I also need to mention Nickel Plate Arts, who initiated my relationship with the Da Vinci Project, but appeared very surprised that they renewed it this month, so I guess they're not terribly involved. But that's all right. We support local arts, especially since I'm the Artist of the Year for Nickel Plate Arts for another month or two anyway.
Wow.
So get that out of the way. I would like people to share things they've been doing in journaling if they've been journaling. Anybody have something they'd like to share?
Am I the only one that can barely hear Jeff? I can hear everybody else when they speak, but Jeff, you're really, really low volume to me.
I can move my mic. Does that help?
Okay, that's better.
That's better.
Yes.
Okay. And I can turn up the
I'm
gain a little.
deaf, but
I don't like this in my face, and it doesn't need to be, but let me turn this up too. Is that helping?
Oh,
much
yeah.
better. Thank you.
Okay. I have a box that connects the mic to the computer, and I dropped it today, so the settings probably get off.
Oh.
Thank you for mentioning it, Lori.
You're welcome.
Okay, so who's done what? Anybody? Anybody? I can't.
Well,
I've been journaling like crazy, so.
I haven't been for a week or so because we've had lots of excitement in our own lives.
Yes, you have.
But I did start my last entry because I've been just trying to make drawings of things I see, and I do have plans to put a bluegill in my journal next, but things have to calm down. But I've been experimenting with vellum and overlays, which is something I used to do a lot. So, for instance, I had watercolor of one of the flowers in my yard, one of my irises, but I also then made an overlay with the same thing, labeling the parts. So I'd like to do some things like that, just to not distract from the actual drawing, but sort of do the repetition so you can label things, but then enjoy the drawing as its own work of art too.
Okay.
So
That's fantastic. And actually, I'm going to mention overlays again briefly today. Anyone else?
I haven't really started journaling yet. I just got all my supplies finally, but every
Good.
time I walk my dog, I take pictures. I pick up things.
Oh, those are wonderful.
nice.
I'm really interested in like the texture, the moss growing on the rocks, the veins in the leaves. So I picked up things to give me inspiration.
Well, you're in a completely different environment than you used to. Everything's new, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Pacific Northwest is definitely different than Indiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm seeing plants and flowers and things that are new to me that I haven't seen since my childhood. So I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, that's great. I love visiting my sister because the birds are different, the slugs are different, the deer walk up to you.
Yeah, I remember the big banana slugs when I lived in Seattle. You
Yeah.
walk outside in the morning and they're like that big across the sidewalk.
They're amazing. My neighbor tonight went on a rant about slugs and how disgusting they are and trying to get rid of them in her yard. Like, I don't know why they're bothering you or how they're bothering you, but okay. The quietest neighbors I have. Anybody else want to share? Okay. This is where face-to-face would be so much better, but that's okay. So I am going on a canoe trip in a couple of weeks, and it's a very different canoe trip for me. It's a group I never knew anything about. It's called Niches, Niches, and it's a group that manages, it's a land trust that manages land along Wildcat Creek, which goes in central Indiana from east of Kokomo to Lafayette and joins the Wabash in Lafayette. And it's a fairly pristine creek. I've never canoed it. It's the longest navigable creek in Indiana. I've heard wonderful things about it from my friends from Lafayette, but I've never canoed it. And Tab, who was in this class last time, he was in the first 2 sessions last time, is building a ukulele, or was building a ukulele with me and will be again. And he's on the board, and we got talking about it. And I got invited on their Voyage of Discovery, which is an annual trip where naturalists canoe the creek with people that are very interested. And there's a lot of interaction about wildlife and creek ecology and environmental things. And then you have to do some kind of journal at the end of it or a reflection. So I've been thinking about that. And in light of this class and the bookbinding class, I've been looking at, I want to do something, a book that will have a map of the creek. I guess I can flip the other camera. I don't have anything to show you except what you've already seen, but I don't know that I've got that camera set up right. Yes, I do. Is that my hand? There it is. Okay. So I'd like to take one of these concertina books, and I'd like to do, so you can see the whole thing. I would like to do a map of the creek across the entire concertina, and then have things that flip out vertically from that with reflections and drawings that interact with the creek. So that's my vision. So today, and I didn't start planning till today because I had other things I had to do, but today was your day. I spent all day on this class. I started thinking about how I could do that. So I started looking at maps. And I went out and bought a gazetteer. And I think if you're in the United States, you've seen these. And these are really neat atlases. There's one for every state. On the back, there's a state map, and then it tells you what page to go to. And I'm sorry for the glare, but it tells you what page to go to see certain things. So the creek that I'm going to be paddling is right here. And I bought this map so I could trace it and make the map for my book. But if we let me put something next to it for scale. What do I have? I have a soda pop bottle. That'll do it, bottle top. But if I put that next to it, you can see how tiny that scale is. And this map is really known for being large scale, but that's when you're driving in a car. When you're covering 60 miles an hour, this is a pretty large scale map. But for a canoe trip where you're going 3, 4, 5 miles an hour at the most, you can see the level of detail is really, really tiny. So my journey today has been to explore maps, try to find some kind of scale that you can relate to in your journals, and find ways that we can translate that into some kind of journal work. That is the plan. Do we like maps?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that a bleh or a yeah?
Yeah.
I still take my old atlas map when I travel on trips. I don't always rely on my GPS.
Well, that light's terrible. My argument, there we go. That's amazing. I turn the light off and it gets better. Without map skills, GPS doesn't mean much, doesn't mean everything it should to you. Because you still need to have a sense of what north, east, south, and west are. You still have to have a sense of understanding how a geographic area is spatially represented on a map. So I don't think map skills are dead. I just think the technology supports that. So I don't know why I thought I needed to throw that down right now. I'm going to take that one off. We're going to look at that later. I'm going to try something new tonight. I have actually set up a few web pages that we can look at. I want to talk about scale. Are you guys seeing a picture of a computer screen now?
Not yet.
Yeah. Now I think we are.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to get up. There we go.
There we go. Yep.
Okay. You can see that?
Yep.
I had a monitor set up, but last week we had problems. I took it off. So I'm going to go to here to a print. I started a Pinterest page. There's not much on it. But I want to talk to you about just different levels of scale and ways that we can look at maps in our journals. So the first thing I looked at was backyard and garden maps. I can't even. There are so many things going on here. You don't need my business hub. That is not what I wanted. Bear with me, folks. Like you have a choice.
Get $20 back.
Now you can see all my crazy pins. I had a board up. There we go. It's the same stuff. All right, so this, I actually put a link of this today on the Facebook page. And this is a pretty solid plan on how to map your backyard. So when I talk about maps, I don't think, if you've not drawn a map since somebody, your third grade teacher told you to, and I was that third grade teacher and fourth grade teacher and fifth grade teacher, you're not ready to draw a map of your trip to Yosemite or your hiking trail across the Appalachian Trail. Those are very complex maps. So my suggestion is you start really small. And so I was looking for sites that have backyard and garden maps. And there are a lot of them. And I really like this one because and I'm not going to go to it because you can do this on your own. And actually I will, as few links as I have, I will post the links to my links. But this had a really good plan for how you can approach mapping out your garden or your backyard. And I'm thinking you could start with a campsite. You can start with your backyard. You can start with just any kind of small scale things, and then you can move up to larger things like your entire yard or your neighborhood. And we're going to talk about neighborhoods today. And I found this one. This is actually a camp. But I thought this was a really neat map. And I think maps translate, if you're spatially oriented like you guys are, you would take this class if this spatial things didn't mean something to you. But I think this is a great map because it's all symbolic. I'm sure that the roads go the directions they're supposed to, and left and right all make sense. But, maps are looking from above, and here we're seeing the sides of these bunkhouses, the end of the mess hall, water tower from above. So you're seeing things from all kinds of different angles, but I think it's a really charming map. And it mixes of different kinds of trees. It's clear what's an evergreen, what's deciduous. And I don't know, I really enjoyed that map. There are really a lot of symbolic maps that are pretty interesting to look at. Then I looked at this one. This is an island in Maine, and actually we're going to use an area in Maine on an island as an example. But I like this because it's in a style that we've talked about. They drew this all in a black marker or black pen. It's colored in and shaded with what appear to be Prismacolors. And you can see they've got the trail, a trail marked. They've got some of the major landscapes. They've got the compass set up here. And then they put some anecdotal things here. My campsite 7 greets me with a heart-shaped stone. And there's the stone. I thought that was another island to add to my collection. Buttercups and common speedwell abounds. We're talking about the flowers. We got some pictures of buttercups here. And the wooded site, spelled wrong, face the harbor. Not that I don't spell things wrong. Face the harbor. The brisk cold wind coming off the water is northeasterly. And the fog and mist make it unpleasant for most vacationers. And I spent all my summers in Maine as a kid. That sounds like the perfect morning to me. Getting blown in the face with mist, cold mist. But anyway, I think that's a really beautiful picture of a place that somebody spent some time. And there's their campsite number 7, and you can see the hiking trails. And this reminds me of islands that I stayed on in the Adirondacks that would be really fun to do a similar map for. Then I really liked this one. And I think this is England, judging from the place names, but I don't know. And Denise, you have a lot of English place names in your area, and so do we, so I don't know.
I am English.
Oh, that's right, I knew that. So are a ton of my in-laws. But I like that this has a map, and it's more of a road map, a very country road map. And then we've got a landscape. And we talked last time we're together about drawing landscapes and defining that space by taking a piece of card and cutting that rectangle out. So you can hold that in front of you or at an arm's length and frame what you want to draw. So you don't have that challenge of how do I draw the entire area around me, that 360 degrees, which is a trap. Landscape painters have to find a way to define that left and right and top and bottom.
That's actually New Zealand.
Is it? Thank you.
Queenstown, Roxburgh, yep.
Okay.
Ranfurly, yeah. New Zealand, South Island.
Fantastic. Thank you. Glad there's an expert in the room. And then I want to throw this one up because, well, this is a style I wish I could nail. I'm not going to. But this is from the Lewis and Clark journals. And if there is a nature journal, it's Nature Journal. Lewis and Clark wrote it. I don't remember which one did the journals. I read the books on the was it the Bicentennial Week? No, I don't know. I'm gonna backpedal on that one. I read all the books, but fantastic technical drawings of a river and lots of anecdotal stuff down the side, things that they observed. And I think the nice thing about maps is you can spatially represent. We talked about doing journals where we do bird lists or we reflect, and those have more to do with time aspects than physical space aspects. So by doing a map, you can actually nail down exactly where you saw these things. And you can still put the time in. The when is still part of that game.
That's a bit like the strip maps that they used to use in England back in the, 1600s when they went traveling, because there weren't that many roads. The map represented just a straight line from where you were going from and to, and then it just listed all the landmarks. So it didn't attempt to show the shape of the road, but it was kind of a visual list of all the things you would see so that you knew where you were. That
is fantastic. And that's exactly what I want to do in that book for my trip in a couple of weeks. It's just turn it into, take it down to its essentials and just have essentially a straight line with a few of the quirks and turns. And so those are called strip maps traditionally.
I believe so. That's what I think of. There's probably a better name for them than that, but that's what they used to do when they didn't have, road signs and things like that.
Right. That's fantastic. Thank you. I had something else to say, but I don't remember what it is. But I have the mic. I'll think of something to say. So anyway, those are the maps I had as examples. And I've also proven to myself I can use a computer and talk to you, which I wasn't sure I could do. Let's come back to me for a minute. Not that you need to see me, but are you looking at me now?
Yes.
Okay, because I have no way to know what this is really showing except what I tell it to do. All right, so what I've done is I wanted to take you through an exercise I did today to turn a place that was familiar to me into a map. And the first thing I did, I'm going to go back up to the computer screen. Go to a different page. You know what, I'm going to go back. I need to check and see if anybody's waiting outside because I haven't in a minute. Okay, we're good. So I was a geography major in college, so maps, in the beginning of college, I switched to education. So maps were everything to me. And we studied topographic maps. This is a topographic map. The entire United States, and I'm sure every country does this, has a grid system that's been laid over it. In the United States, it was in 1810, they determined a grid system. It's been used to map the country ever since. And they have these quad maps or topographic maps, and they're highly, highly detailed. And on this one, actually, I'm going to flip to another one real quickly. This is where I'm going to start my canoe trip in 2 weeks. So I want to make a map of this river that's highly detailed. And so I went to Google Earth first, and it's pretty clear to see where the stream goes. I'm going to put in here at Adams Mill and go around this meander. In this meander, we're going to go down through all this, but because of the trees, you're not sure where the shoreline is, and there's no sense of elevation, where things are dropping fast, or they're dropping slowly, and those are things that I need in a map, so I went to these. And unfortunately, these are great. These are absolutely great, and I spent hours in labs in college looking at these maps. And I mean, they right down to every house. There's the little village of Cutler in every house. This little gathering around Adams Mill, every house, every street. And the elevations are here. When you see the elevation lines close together like this, you know it's very steep. So this is going to be a cliff. When they're far apart, like over here, that's a plain. It's going to be very, very flat here. And actually, you can see things that the river left, or the creek left. Here's a meander. Meanders are in a mature stream, meanders are the curves that come double back on themselves. But if you look here, look at, there's a giant one out here with no water in it. There's a little bit of water sitting here. And that's because that creek once went from here and followed around that great big bend and cut a cliff there. And then consequently over the years, it drifted back into this path here. So by looking at these topographic maps, you can see some really, really cool things. So anyway, then I decided today that that was much too complex for me to turn into a map for a journal in the 4 or 5 hours I had to plan for this class. It was really interesting, but it wasn't going to turn into class. So then I went to some place that was super familiar to me that I knew had no trees, because the trees are the problem, right? So this is an island off the coast of Maine. It's called Sawyer Island. And I spent my summers here as a kid. And there are many, many more buildings here than there were then. I grew up in this house right here. My parents bought this house in the early 70s and sold it in the late 80s. And I write about it a lot, and all of my artwork goes back to this house. Poor Miles has heard these stories 1,000 times. But, and I want to backtrack a little bit. I read a book about writing memoirs probably 10 years ago, and they had all kinds of mapping activities, like map the places of your childhood and the stories will come back. And I've mapped this area over and over and over, as well as the creek behind the house I lived in Indiana. I spent my summers here and the rest of the year in Indiana. And it's amazing how much comes back to you, because especially as a child, you're so spatially oriented. These things have incredibly deep meaning to you. And my sister talked about taking this class. I think the stories that we could share, and she's not here tonight, and that's fine. But I smoked my first cigarette right there. Probably one of the 10 I've ever smoked in my life. I never was a smoker, but I remember my cousin Kim. This is a ferry landing, and this is just a little tiny building you wait for the ferry in, and we used to sneak down there. She'd sneak down there to smoke, and I'd go with her. I think I took one puff and had enough of that. But there's stories in places, and moving forward in your nature journals, those places are your stories. So I think it's important to think about place to some degree. So anyway, I took that and I printed, let me show you this too, because no, I didn't. I was going to say I have the topo map, but I didn't get that. Since there are no trees here, and I know this area intimately, I could just trace it. So we're going to go back out. I'll show you what I drew. There's Joni. Oh, Laura's here.
Yay.
Yay. Let me turn this light back on. So I printed out that area. First of all, I drew it from memory, which was a bit of a disaster, but that still works. That's a little like we're not seeing that yet, just a second. When Denise is talking about those strip maps, it's the same kind of thing. I'm still here. There we go. You want to kind of pare it down to just the information you need and no more, right? So I printed this out and I just traced certain things. So I traced the houses here. There's a fence here, a house here, house here. This was a shop where lobstermen sold lobsters. This is the little ferry boat depot. This was a garage because the people who took this ferry off this dock here had to park the car somewhere. So some of them had a garage. Most of them parked in a meadow here. And then this big rectangle, this house, there was a house here that burned down in the early 60s. It was a hotel once. And this was the tennis court for the hotel. And when I was growing up, it wasn't a tennis court anymore, but you could see a tennis court. It was a clay court. Grass was growing in it, but it had posts or a post, and it was flat rectangular. And again, and our house was actually part of that hotel complex. Not any time I was living it. This had burned down by the time I ever showed my face there. So anyway, I just took this. I did a really, really quick black and white. I found it. I did a really quick black and white scan. And then I put that on a light table, and I just traced the parts that were important to me. And there they are. So neighbor's house, my house, et cetera, et cetera. We've been through that a million times. And then I went through and added details from memory. So now this is mine. This is not based just on things I got off of a picture online. I've added the things that mean something to me. And I spent an hour on this. I could go so much deeper. I didn't draw the docks. Our house had a dock. This house had a dock. The ferry landing had a dock. But I could write stories about things that happened on top of this. This was a hill. I could write stories about that. I drew this. This tree is my apple tree. When we moved in there, that tree was given to me. I don't know why, but that was Jeff's apple tree. And actually, we parked here and walked down both sides of that tree. So these things are all stories that are part of me, and we don't need to tell all of them right now. But if you draw an area like this, I could put blueberries here. I could put black raspberries here. Rosa rugosa growing along this fence. There are things that I could add, nature things I could add, as well as historic things, as well as personal things that would make this map really, really relevant to whatever I'm writing about. And Joni's talking about overlays, and I didn't do anything with an overlay, and I obviously got this in the ink by the press. But I think having a page like this and having 2 or 3 overlays and labeling it for different things, labeling maybe your life experiences here, maybe the naturalist experiences here. I saw a mink once come up over these rocks and walk and run through our yard and go back in the woods. Cool, really cool stuff. the neighbors that lived here were here year round. They saw a moose do the same thing. So those things could maybe go over an overlay. Our neighbor Robin, who lived here, had a market garden here for about 2 or 3 acres of a market garden here, and we helped with that as a kid. That's something to map. And you could map just your garden and get nature journaling for a year. I mean, they're just, if you're an avid gardener, there are things going on every single day in your garden. I know there are in mine. I find black swallowtail larvae, and I find monarchs later in the year. And it would be awesome to map those things and where you're finding those, and then add the dates, whether it's with on maps or overlays. I also copied like 5 of these because even if you're not using overlays, you could do copy after copy with different things. Wouldn't it be great to do one just of your yard or your immediate area and label every single tree? So some of these trees I know this tree, and I know that tree, and I know that tree, but the rest to me are just a clumps of trees that I remember. These were evergreens. This was all forest from here back. It was all meadow from here forward, with a few trees here and there. And I could add some more. I'm talking way too much.
I think it'd be interesting, you said you made the extra copies to do one for each of the 4 seasons of what you saw seasonally.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. Any other idea? I know other people have ideas. We need to learn to speak.
I love this idea for grandparents. If you have them around, your parents, your grandparents, get a plot of where they grew up off of Google Maps, draw it out like this, and then have them tell stories about what it looked like when they were kids and down by the river, and this is where Dad kept the chickens and that kind of thing, and preserve that for your kids. That's really
that's fantastic. And so I grew up in this town in Hamilton County, Indiana, and in this town in Maine. And Hamilton County, Indiana was, when I grew up, it was a farm town. Carmel, Indiana, which is now an incredibly upscale, fancy, dancy town of galleries and fancy posh boutiques, was a farm town with a drugstore and a barber shop and, I don't know, a strip. It was about a block long. Saturday mornings, the farmers came in their pickup trucks and their families all shopped. That's the town I grew up in. It's not what's here now. And people are sick of me talking about what it looked like 50 years ago. But I think it's important and relevant. And wouldn't it be nice to at least get it on paper so somebody could see it sometime in the future? If my kids don't want to hear it, they've heard it all their lives. But maybe their kids might, or somebody. We all have information that's incredibly important, don't we?
I think a lot of people would enjoy that. And I mean, I understand because I still have 2 elderly aunts, and our family farm was in Kettering in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
And that farmhouse where they were born is still there. It's an attorney's office, but the land has changed.
Sure.
And when you talk to my aunt, you can drive through this area and she will say that was, and I just like want to capture that because there's such wonderful memories of her and my dad when they were growing up as young kids in the Depression. And the mapping of that would be so helpful because I see it, but I can't see as much as she remembers. And when
Right.
she's gone, that memory's gone.
Well, my grandfather was born in Chester County, Pennsylvania in 1902, and he used to drive me around. And your uncle owned that farm, and your great-grandfather owned that farm, and they're buried in that cemetery. And I've retained more of that information than most have because I keep going back to remind myself, but I've never done this with it, and I think that'd be very valuable.
I think the stories of ordinary people are the real history, really. The history that gets recorded is normally about big situations and what governments have been up to in councils and blah, 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 and all that crap. But the real history is how ordinary people live their ordinary lives and what little things happened, what were regular things that they used to do. And yet often it's lost. So things like this are important to hold on to.
Somebody will be telling about how you and I lived through a pandemic someday.
Yeah.
And congratulations, Denise. You're in a COVID-free nation. How awesome is that?
It is. It's wonderful.
I would love to have your leadership. We're not going to.
You can't have it.
I know. I know, and you won't let me in either. That's all right. So yeah, I mean, we are making the history that's really important. It's not the people in Washington or in our capital cities. It's us. But we have to preserve it somehow. And somehow I got from being a naturalist to a historian, but I am. This is just as much a passion to me as the naturalist part is. And this applies to both of those and many, many other things. So let's see.
I found Jeff when a few weeks back, I went back to my hometown in Billings, Montana, and I was amazed. I haven't lived there since 1993. I was amazed driving through downtown how many of the family-owned businesses that I grew up with in the 70s and 80s there are still there, still in the same buildings and still in business.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was just a wonderful experience to see that. I was quite surprised.
That's delightful. Because, yeah, that's not been my experience anywhere I've gone. I go back to Maine, and it's, no.
I mean, there's a lot of new stuff, but I was surprised at the percentage that was still there.
Isn't that
still in
nice?
existence. It was just wonderful.
I could go on and on about what happened in Maine, but somebody very wealthy bought most of the town is what happened. I'm going to throw this down, because I did get this out, and I didn't really bring it in, but I want to talk about it a bit. And I was a little bit remiss in that I was going to get something when I went home for dinner, and I forgot to. But this map, this is the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. And this is the trip that I took in 2014 and was going to finish this year, but that's not going to happen. Because of the virus and because I got a huge contract that I can't turn my back on. I'm going to be carving Dalmatians for months, but that's okay. So this is upstate New York. New York City's down here. Boston is here. Portland, Maine is here. Montreal is here. And I paddled from Old Forge, New York to Rangeley, Maine, which is about here, solo for 6 weeks. That was a 6-week trip. I went across Lake Champlain, across the Adirondacks, across Lake Champlain, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then well into Maine. And then this summer I was supposed to do the rest of it. But I wanted to bring that up because I was going to bring maps from my trip. And I only have maps in the shop from the parts of the trip I didn't take yet because I was planning the trip for this year. But if these maps, there are 13 of them for the entire trail. It's 750 miles. I've done 450. And they have all the camps, all the places to camp, all the portages, all the places to buy food, all the support you need for a canoe trip. And if we were to pull out the ones that I used on my trip, they're, I'm feeding back over somebody. Hello? That's better. Well, it's not, but I'll keep going.
We made you mute.
If you can hear me, that's fine. But on the maps that I took on the trip, they're full of arrows and circles and 3 or 4 sentences next to campsites. And there's all kinds of notation in these parts. And remember, nature journaling has no rules. So that's just as much a nature journal as anything that I would put in a book and carry under my arm. So don't underestimate or don't neglect the idea of grabbing an atlas or tracing maps into your book or looking up fancy folders. And I may do a mini lesson on this where you can take big maps and fold them into small things and put them in your journal so that you have those spatial references with your experiential thing. And that's really all I have tonight, except I took a couple challenges for you.
So when you use the overlays, Jeff, for somebody who's not doesn't have the art part, has the nature part down.
Yeah.
Where do we get those, or how are they? Is it just like tracing paper? Is like
It can be.
Okay.
There are. I'm trying to unshare. Why can't I? There we go. So there are a lot of options, or 3 or 4 that come to mind. One is you can buy tracing paper. So you go to an art supply store, like we have those anymore. Joni, where have you been getting tracing paper and vellum?
I use it for an overlay with the quality of tracing paper. With straight edge.
Joni, I couldn't hear you.
No, that
What
was
is it that you used when you showed that earlier? When you showed your picture earlier?
Can you hear me now? I'm using a different device.
your mic's broken up.
Yeah.
We may need her to type her answer in a chat.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah, type out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I use vellum, and vellum that you buy at art stores is not real vellum, it's plastic. And I'm not sure where you get that now. I'm sure it's on Amazon.
You can get vellum like with scrapbooking supplies as well.
Okay, yeah, sure, they'd have it. Absolutely. And then I buy glassine from Dolphin Paper, which I've talked to you guys. I guess I haven't. I've talked to my book arts group about Dolphin Paper. I will put Dolphin Paper's links on the Nature Journaling Facebook page. And they have glassine. It's super cheap. I get this is a sheet that I've cut from already. It's that big. And that's just a couple of dollars, $2 or $3. And I like that because the other challenge, I want to tell well, that feedback is driving me crazy. I just got to ignore it. The other thing I want to talk to you about is that I'm being encouraged that we do a level kind of thinking in this segment. And I posted a site, a link about somebody that was doing a test with squirrels and testing different food to see what the squirrels liked. And then that would be something you could journal and keep. I'm going to read the chats for a second because I think there's some insight here. Okay, nope, just tracing paper sources, and those are good. Are people there? I've kind of lost everything. Okay, I see Denise nodding. Thank you. All right, so I posted something where somebody did an experiment. I'd like to challenge you to do some kind of experiment. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be fancy. As a science teacher for years and years, I'd love to talk to you about a controlled experiment and having one variable. But you know what? That's not reality, especially in nature, because you can't control a lot of nature. So I would really like you to think of something you could do that would be an interaction with nature, to an experiment, a what if, what would happen if I did this, or what could I learn? And I'd like to talk about that next week. And the classic one I posted was somebody putting out 6, 7, 8 different kinds of seeds to see what the squirrels liked. And then somebody told me they tried that, and the chipmunks ate it all. Or set up 3 different feeding platforms in your yard. It could just be a bowl for an afternoon with 3 different foods and see what foods different birds are attracted to. Or just look at your bird feeder and see what time of day different birds come. I know at my feeder which birds are there in the morning, which ones there in the evening. I'm not going to reveal that because I want to see what yours do. I'm getting an unstable notice again, but I'm just going on. The thing I've been doing, and this is totally unscientific, but it's been just absolutely fascinating, is that we have crows in our neighborhood for the first time ever. And crows are my favorite bird in the world. If you watch my movie, the director calls them my spirit bird, and I back up a little bit and say, I don't know what a spirit bird is, but I guess if I had one, it would be a crow. And when the crows showed up, of course I had to go out and buy a crow call, didn't I? And so I've been calling the crows when I go out to my truck, when I go out in the yard, And I'm getting a sense, now this is me personifying crows, humanizing crows, but I'm getting a sense that they're learning my routine and that they're learning who I am. And I know crows do recognize human beings. So I don't know whether I'm projecting that or whether that's real, but that's a lot for me to write about and reflect on. And that's the study in quotes, because it's not scientific, that I'm doing right now. And I challenge you to do something where you're interacting or experimenting or testing something in nature and writing about it. And I want to talk about that next week. And that next week's lesson will be about developing those kind of activities. With somebody just showing up now. That's all right. I can hear nobody at all. I see you're out there. A lot of you have turned your mics off. I think that's taking care of a lot of the background noise, and I appreciate that. So I don't have any more to talk to you about. Your challenges are to see if you can find ways to use maps in your journals and to see if you can do some kind of experimentation. And I'd love to hear your comments. You can leave them as chats since it's so noisy, or we can try to talk somewhere. That's up to you.
It's hard. Everybody seems to be breaking up, at least. Am I breaking up?
You're fine right this moment. Can you hear me?
You're good.
Okay. No, you're fine.
Maybe the satellite train was just going overhead and was ironically interfering with it. I think it's supposed to make our satellite interface better. No, you never know. Sunspots or
I can understand you, but you're doing it.
We used to say it was birds stood on the telephone lines having a scratch.
Quick question for you, Miles. Where in Colorado are you?
I'm in Colorado Springs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
My daughter,
right by the
my
mountains.
daughter lives in Fort Collins.
Oh, cool. That's not too far.
Yeah.
Miles gets bears in his yard.
Could you? What was that?
I said, you
Kinda
get
broke up
bears
there
in
for
your
a minute.
yard.
Yes. Yeah, they just walk around again.
That's awesome. All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and terminate this.
Brown.
I'm not hearing anything. and we've accomplished what we need to. Hopefully next week our connection will be better. If you need to talk to me, leave something in chat. And feel free to email me. I will answer every single time. It may take a day, but I will. All right?